Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. We're on the radio. As always, we're screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and we are streaming live on the RNZ website. We hope it stays up tonight. However you are doing so, thanks for joining us. You are very welcome. Tonight, a man in a green and white tracksuit sighted near the scene of the brutal murder in Te Atatu. Who is he? A doctor charged with indecent assault on 8 patients is still able to practice, and he has no criminal convictions. He's been charged with nothing, but 2 months on, a New Zealander is still in a maximum security jail in Perth. All of that and much more. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. A next-door neighbour says she saw a man in a tracksuit acting suspiciously near the home of a 69-year-old West Auckland woman on the day she was murdered. Sean Shu Tian was found dead by family members at her Te Atatu home early last Friday evening, and the police are searching for the attacker or attackers responsible. Today they called for sightings of a man in his 20s dressed in a green and white tracksuit and white cap in the Glenville Lane area about lunchtime on Friday. Neighbour Marianne Pyro told our reporter Carla Penman she was at home looking after her granddaughter and her son when a man lurking around raised her suspicions.
Can you tell me anything more about this person?
No, just that he was casual about it. If it was him, I don't know.
Marianne Pyro says she didn't know Mrs Tian but had seen her from time to time out tending to her garden. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says it's too early to speculate on the cause of a fire that destroyed a tourist boat off the coast of Whakatane yesterday afternoon. 60 people had to be rescued from the PJ5 after it was rapidly engulfed in flames. TAKE's lead investigator Rob Thompson says they're not yet sure if the fire started in the engine as first thought.
Well, we know that the general area of the fire was in the middle of the boat somewhere, but we can't, it's speculation to say where it's from.
Rob Thompson says a full investigation will take some time and may require either lifting the wreck or sending divers down. An inmate died at the Otago Corrections Facility overnight, the second to die at the prison within 2 months. Prison Director Jack Harrison says staff found the inmate in an unresponsive state this morning. Mr Harrison says medical care was provided but the inmate died at the scene. The death has been referred to the coroner and the prison inspectorate, and the police are investigating. China's economy grew 6.8% in the fourth quarter, matching expectations, but the slowest since the global financial crisis. The recent plunge in the country's stock markets and the yuan currency have stoked worries that the conditions in the world's second-largest economy may be rapidly deteriorating. China is weighed down by weak exports, factory overcapacity, slowing investment, a soft property market and high debt levels. Business confidence has increased from a near 5-year low. Firms are more confident about their own prospects and looking to hire more staff. A survey of business opinion for the December quarter shows a seasonally adjusted net 13% of firms expect the economy to improve in the coming months. The September survey had shown a net 10% expecting the economy to deteriorate, which was the worst since March 2011. New Zealand Institute of Economic Research senior economist Christina Leung says the survey points to solid growth for the economy this year.
It's shaping up to be a reasonably good year for businesses over 2016. Demand is improving and businesses are feeling more confident about hiring. This means that overall we should expect to see growth pick up over the coming year.
Christine Leung says inflation pressures remain low and the Reserve Bank can afford to keep its interest rate on hold for this year. A court has heard that a Hawke's Bay GP charged with stupefying and indecently assaulting patients is being monitored and should be able to continue seeing patients. The doctor, who has name suppression, is challenging a medical council attempt to suspend him from practice. He's denied charges he indecently assaulted 8 and stupefied 5 male patients in 2014. His lawyer told the Wellington District Court the doctor used permitted sedatives that could produce sexual hallucinations but no longer uses them. He also said the doctor was now working with patients in a completely different demographic under close monitoring. The council's lawyer, Dale LaHood, says there was evidence of a persistent sexual obsession and the public required protection. The Eagles guitarist Glenn Fry has died at the age of 67. Fry co-founded the Eagles in 1971 with Don Henley, Bernie Leadon and Randy Meisner, and they had many hits. Their best-known songs include Hotel California, Peaceful Easy Feeling, and the one that Fry sang on, Take It Easy.
Well, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load. I got 7 women on my mind. 4 that want to own me, 2 that want to stone me, 1 says she's a friend of mine. Take it easy.
Glenn Fry, who's died at the age of 67. In sport, the Breakers coach Dean Vickerman says it was always his plan to leave the NBL basketball team at the end of the season. Vickerman will be replaced by his assistant and current Tall Blacks coach Paul Henare. Vickerman was assistant coach of the Breakers for their first 3 championships and coached them to the title last year. The Australian says when he took over as head coach, he had a 3-year plan.
You know, it's not every coach goes into their job thinking about succession plan. But I just knew, you know, with me and Andre being here for a long time, that one of the greatest things about an import coming to another country is to help upskill and then, you know, hopefully leave it to the local guys to take over, and that was always my mission.
Vickerman says he has nothing planned for his future yet. Meanwhile, another former player, Dylan Boucher, will replace Richard Clark as the Breakers' general manager. The 7 times Grand Slam champion Venus Williams has been upset in the first round of singles at the Australian Open in Melbourne. The 35-year-old was beaten in straight sets by British number 1 Joanna Konta. And the New Zealand under-17 women's football team has finished top of its group in the Oceania Championship in Rarotonga after beating Tonga 13-0. That's the news.
A burning boat.
Everybody walked off the boat and with the Coast Guard shed and got a towel and a blanket. It was really good. We were really so lucky.
A burning issue.
No one can predict whether the medicine's going to work or not, but that child ought to be given the right to try it.
Dim Pahutakawa.
We're really paying for our brilliant display we got last year. They tend to put out less flowering for maybe a couple of years.
Light and shade. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, freeing dementia sufferers from prisons of silence with new storytelling techniques. And after 10, the doctor who cast off his middle-class life in Iowa to work for free among the world's most disadvantaged. Join me, Lynn Freeman, from 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty. A few showers clearing in the morning, however cloudy periods persisting in Northland with the odd shower tomorrow evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihepe. Fine spells and occasional showers, the showers becoming confined to the high country tomorrow. Gisborne, rain mostly clearing this evening but persisting about East Cape. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa fine. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, showers with possible thunderstorms north of Christchurch, easing this evening, becoming fine in the morning. Buller and Westland, showers becoming confined to the ranges tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, scattered rain, clearing overnight. However, rain returning to Fiordland tomorrow afternoon and scattered falls spreading to Southland and Clutha at night. The Chatham Islands, low cloud or fog, rain developing tonight, clearing tomorrow afternoon or evening. It's 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. Very much indeed. See you in 22 minutes with the headlines at 5:30. Lots on the programme tonight as we teased up the top. We've also got Nona Peltier coming in to talk business after the 5:30 headlines, and we're in Syria later. But let's begin with electronic monitoring. It is again under the spotlight as a man described as dangerous continues to evade police after cutting off his ankle bracelet. Matthew Kidman was on electronically monitored bail awaiting trial on 2 charges of unlawful sexual connection. He absconded in the early hours of Friday morning, and police say there have been several sightings of him around the Wellington region. Kidman had previously escaped custody in 2008 and 2012, which would seem material in this case. He's the latest of a string of prisoners absconding or committing crimes while on electronic monitoring, including the rape and murder of Blessy Katenko, of course, by Tony Robertson in 2014. The Police and Corrections Minister, Judith Collins, joins us now live on the phone. Minister, are you there?
Yes, I am, John.
Thank you. Lovely to have you on the programme. And can we just, before we get going, an inmate has died in the Otago Corrections Facility overnight, the second to die in the prison in 2 months. Do you know anything about that?
I know a little bit about that, and what I can say, obviously don't know all of the detail because it will be being investigated.
Yeah.
In any year, we could have anything from 3 to 1 year, a few years back, 12 suicides in prisons. And if you compare that to the general population, which is about 569 at the last year, you can see that we're always going to have some, but we're always trying to stop them, and correction staff have saved hundreds of lives over the last few years.
If this is in fact that, and we don't want to prejudge what's taken place here, but if this is in fact the second in 2 months in Otago, that is simply not good enough by any measure.
Of course it's not. Well, of course it's not. But the fact is, John, is that it's still got to be investigated. And when you're dealing with people who are in highly stressed situations, it does happen. It's not acceptable. But in the general population, John, I think you've got to also look at the fact that we have, almost 600 people a year out in the population who kill themselves. It's a terrible situation for everybody.
Let's talk about Matthew Kidman. Should he have been on electronic monitoring bail?
Well, in my opinion, and corrections opinion, this was the wrong call. But look, the decision was made by a judge, not by corrections.
Can we get some clarity around how the decision was made? Did police oppose electronic monitoring?
Well, I can tell you that corrections did not recommend electronic monitoring.
Did police oppose it?
Well, I can't tell you that.
Okay, you're the police minister though, right?
But I can. Well, I am, but I can't tell you that because I was looking at this from the corrections point of view.
Is that the more convenient point of view to look at it from, Minister, I wonder? So corrections weren't happy about electronic monitoring. Were the police prepared to accept it?
Well, I have no reason to believe that police were happy with that. And the fact is, it's not up to police or corrections. It's up to a judge. As you rightly said, this person has previously absconded, and you'd have to say it was an unusual decision. But a judge has made that. And the other thing is that as ministers, we don't criticise judges' decisions.
But Minister, is that a rule you've universally stuck to?
Well, yeah, actually. The fact is that we do. We don't individually, criticise judges.
I'm confused about this case of Matthew Kidman entirely. He was taken into custody in March 2014. Is that the right timelines? He was taken into custody in March 2014. Two charges of unlawful sexual connection. Police opposed bail at the time, absolutely. In custody until the 21st of December last year, which is the best, 20 months, slightly more than 20 months. So why was a guy who was in custody for 20 months suddenly out on bail? What had happened there? Have you any idea?
No, I can tell you though is that all I can tell you on that is that corrections did not recommend this sort of bail for him. Okay. And so in those cases, I can't tell you what the judges looked at, but I can tell you that it is a judge's decision. And it's all very well in hindsight because judges are trying to make the best decisions they can on the information they have. Let's go
back to the thing he was wearing, right? This electronic bracelet. Sure. August of last year on TVNZ's breakfast program, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "If you can get them off or cut them off with a pair of scissors, that seems a bit ludicrous in the modern world." Why is that still able to happen?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. And for a start, I think let's get this into perspective. Around 0.5% to 1% of all of those who are monitored by electronic monitoring in this way ever cut their bracelets off. So we're talking a tiny number. Having said that, all of these people have been deemed by a judge to be able to be monitored in this way rather than to be incarcerated in remand waiting for their trial. So you're not talking about every criminal who goes through the system. You're talking about a small number, but in any way, it's about 1,000 people a year, and a judge has decided that they can. The system itself, though, if you were to put in, if you think about alternatives to what there is at the moment, there's got to be some form ability to get off one of these bracelets in medical emergency. If you're talking about it's caught in a car accident or something like that, it holds someone down, there has to be some form of it. But if you also look at things like, let's say, handcuffs or whatever, even they can be got out of by someone who is utterly determined.
So was the Prime Minister wrong when he said it was ludicrous?
No, I think the Prime Minister is simply stating a frustration at the fact that some people who are given this electronic monitoring privilege then abuse it. And they're so stupid to do so because, of course, all they do is they end up breaching their conditions, bail conditions. They end up not getting bail again, and they end up getting caught.
The Corrections and Police Minister, Judith Collins, thank you very much for joining us on Checkpoint. We appreciate it. 5:15 is the time. The owner of a tour boat that caught fire with 60 people on board off the Whakatane coast says his company isn't fully insured. 53 passengers and 7 crew were forced to jump for their lives into the water off the coast of Whakatane before being picked up very fast by life rafts and boats who really did race to their rescue. The owner of White Island Tours, Peter Tate, was among those plucking passengers from the sea. He told me what happened.
Well, basically the boat was coming back from White Island on its daily trip, and we got a call when the boat was about 500 to 1,000 metres off the bar. Well, actually, the Coast Guard got a call first, and then the skipper called our Sea Ops manager, who happened to be on one of our other vessels, the PJ4, and said that the boat was on fire. So basically, he grabbed a couple of guys that were on the wharf. They shot out. I was about a mile away. I got the call from another friend who said the boat was on fire, and I rushed down with my son and got another 2 staff members, and we hopped on the Motahora Cat, which is our 3rd vessel, and rushed out. And started the rescue operation, and then after that the Coast Guard and a few other commercial boats from around here made their way out. But as to what actually happened, we're just not sure. I mean, obviously it's a fire that started in the engine room. We've got no idea how it started. We're just so relieved that everybody was safe, and the crew and the skipper did an exceptional job of keeping everyone safe. So obviously there's ongoing investigations, but it's a real blow to the company. That was our flagship boat. Jenny and I started this company 26 years ago with a small boat taking 6 people out to the island, and now we have a staff of about 50, taking up to 150 people a day out to the island, mainly overseas visitors. So yeah, it's a real blow, and we've got no idea how it happened at this stage.
It does sound, and obviously it's a blow to the business, and it must have been terrible for the people on board, but it does sound like the rescue operation couldn't conceivably have gone better. Had you rehearsed this?
Well, we do rehearse all scenarios, and we never ever obviously scrimp on any kind of maintenance on the boats. We are also lucky enough that because the boats that we use are purpose-built for the White Island trips, they're both equipped with large inflatables in the aft end. So we'd actually only just last month bought 2 brand new inflatables from Germany, the best military inflatables that you can buy. And so by the time we got there, the crew had mustered the passengers up to the bow, both on the Portuguese bridge and down below, and they'd also dispatched the inflatable off PJ5, that's the one that was burning. And PJ4 got there next, and they were able to deploy their inflatable, so immediately we had 2 reasonably large inflatables in the water and quite testing conditions that were able to pick anyone up that, as they had to jump off the bow of the boat. So, and further to that, we crew our boat according to numbers more for the island, the tour of the volcano, which we sort of like to have 1 to 12, 1 to 15 per group on the island. So hence, 53 passengers. We had 6 crew plus a skipper, which is probably unheard of if you're a passenger boat anywhere else. So we're very lucky in that respect.
It must have been a terrifying few minutes as you raced out there to find out what was going on and see that everyone was okay.
Oh, it was just, I just can't believe how quick it was. I mean, it's a huge vessel. It was 73 foot, it was just, it happened so quick that it was, as I say, and well-built crafts. I mean, this is the 3rd boat we had built down the South Island, the traditional timber boats built like the proverbial 2 years, 9 months it took to build that boat. It was a work of art, and it was built for the heavy seas. It was, and we've just never had an issue with them. So it's yet to know, why the fire started. We don't know, but we know that everybody performed to the very, very best that they possibly could. So very proud of them.
Yeah, I bet you are. Tell me about the people on board, the passengers, most of whom on a typical trip will be foreign tourists. How were they afterwards?
Well, you know, obviously a lot of them jumping into the water were quite terrified. We had, at the stage they were picking them off with our inflatables, we had by that stage another 3 commercial boats out there plus the Coast Guard boat. So basically the inflatables were taking them to the nearest boat they could. And some were, you know, really quite terrified. But we head counted, you know, plenty of times to make sure that everyone was off. Took them back to the first landing in the Whakatane River, and we all assembled at the Coast Guard building so that we could get a head count again, ticked off names. And even at that stage, the passengers were complimenting the crew. They were just saying what a marvellous job everyone done. But in saying all that, you know, as time goes on, you know, people get annoyed as well. They've just lost all their money, their passports, their car keys, and, you know, so we're dealing with all that at the moment. We did put a lot of them up in our hotel that night. We did have a few spare rooms, and so we're doing all we can, but it's very tricky because, you know, there's been no blame set at anything, so we've got to be a bit careful about what we do, really.
And what about the business, Peter? Are you insured against this kind of disaster? I presume you are.
No, we're not.
Oh, no.
No, we're not. We've, I mean, the boat's insured, and you know, business will carry on. We have the other 2 boats that will pick up the workload, albeit they'll have to work a bit harder until we can get our head around what we are going to do as far as replacing it in any shape or form. But you know, we just hope that, well, the insurance side of it goes all right, and but it's a horrendous price to pay to try and get cover for loss of earnings when you're dealing with the marine industry or anything like that. So,
Peter Tate from Whakatane. The time is 22 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. And that's our sting. Coming up, we hear from one of the passengers who feared for his life momentarily on board NZ90 from Tokyo to Auckland on Saturday night as the flight hit unexpected turbulence and well and truly bounced around. Later in the program, we're in Syria, New Zealand, working hard to persuade the UN and, in fact, the world to get more relief into those towns under siege. Although, who do you negotiate with to make that happen? We ask our man at the UN, and Queenstown's first low-cost housing development gets interim approval. 134 homes will be built next to the Kawerau River. We are there. We would love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionewzealand.co.nz. Right, and don't forget you can watch us on Freeview Channel 50, or we're streaming online, and it's still working, it's still up. A family doctor facing serious criminal charges is fighting an attempt to prevent him from seeing patients until the case is decided. Police allege that the male doctor indecently assaulted and stupefied male patients between January and September 2014. Lawyers for the doctor, who has temporary name suppression, argued in the Wellington District Court today that suspending the doctor is not warranted, as he no longer uses the sedative drugs allegedly involved and is also under close monitoring with no further complaints against him. Joining us now is our health correspondent, Karen Brown, who was at court today. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the program.
Hello, John.
Hi. What happened in court today?
Look, as you say, this doctor, who isn't named, is facing criminal proceedings in the High Court at a date yet to be determined. These charges are of indecently assaulting 8 patients and stupefying 5 others between January and September 2014. He has name suppression at the moment, but it's temporary, and his lawyer told the Wellington District Court today that he will be putting in a bid for ongoing name suppression in relation to that. Any identifying details about the case remain suppressed, but today's hearing in the Wellington District Court was about whether he should be suspended or not, as we await for all of this to unfold. And what we heard today in the District Court was about the drugs that were alleged to have been used in these cases. One was a benzodiazepine drug called midazolam, and another was fentanyl, and fentanyl is an opiate. The former is said to have an amnesia-like effect, and it can cause, the court was told, it can cause sexual hallucinations. Now, the Medical Council claims that the doctor made inappropriate use of sedation when use of a local anaesthetic might have been sufficient.
So, Karen, the Medical Council wants this guy suspended.
The Medical Council does want him suspended, and this is its a second attempt to achieve that. But the doctor's lawyer, Harry Wilkins QC, said it was permissible for a doctor to have used those drugs, and this doctor's background may have made that more likely. He said his client emphatically denies the allegations. There are no prior complaints against the doctor, and he is now under very close conditions and monitoring, and where the court was told today that this doctor is working in a completely different demographic or age group to the patients that he had been seeing. Also told that the doctor has excellent references from 3 previous employers, and Mr Wilkins QC described the Medical Council decision to suspend the doctor as irrational and unreasonable, and said it was a split or divided decision by the council.
Extraordinary. Thank you, Karen Brown. We really appreciate it, Karen Brown. Lots of details suppressed, so we can't go into it at great length, but the Medical Council wanted suspension. In fact, they've argued for it twice. But a very strong kickback against that from the doctor himself. 26 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. An Air New Zealand flight from Tokyo to Auckland at the weekend caused terror when severe turbulence sent it dropping through the air halfway through dinner service. Food went flying, people thought they were going to die for a couple of moments, and onboard doctors had to tend to some of the passengers. Auckland chef Oliver Philp was flying home from a 3-week holiday in Japan. I spoke to him via Skype video and asked him to tell us what happened.
So basically from the start, the plane took off pretty normally. We were up in the air for about a good hour when dinner came out as per usual. Everything seemed fine until the plane started to gently get some turbulence, as you usually would expect in a flight. And then the plane just dropped quite suddenly, which followed by that was a lot of violent rocking and vigorous turbulence for a bit. And then again after that was another much more severe drop, which kind of really brought the cabin to a kind of halt of terror, as food and all the drinks and kind of everything went everywhere.
And so was there any warning that this was about to happen, or were you just all completely taken by surprise, including the crew, I guess?
Yeah, there was no prior warning. The crew was still down in the rear cabin as they were serving their food when the first drop happened, so obviously they were a bit in the mess as well. But obviously they did the best they could. They got everything up as fast as they could to get out of the way, but there was still no real warning about what was going to happen or what continued to happen.
And how did people react on the plane? Because there's nothing more terrifying than just simply dropping, but for it to happen twice in a row with a period of shaking and thudding in between, how were people coping?
Initially, people just kind of scream because of the first thing you do when you get that massive shock. But during the large amounts of turbulence, they were mainly just confused about what was going on, whether it was a serious weather condition or if there was something actually wrong with the plane. And then when that second drop happened, they really kind of started to think that something was wrong with the plane and that they may actually die, which thankfully wasn't the case. Yeah.
So you seriously started to contemplate the length of your future?
Yeah, for a very brief moment in my time, I thought I was going to die on my way home from holiday, which was not pleasant. My partner next to me was clutching my arm, and she was in a very similar distraught state. People around the plane were a bit panicky. I saw reports on the internet of someone's kids professing they don't want to die at a very young age, and yeah, it just all got pretty interesting for a bit.
What did the captain say when he or she came over the PA eventually?
As soon as they came over the PA, they just announced that it was a lot of unexpected weather they couldn't possibly anticipate, and that the turbulence was something they didn't find or they didn't know how to deal with, so they just decided to change the course to get around it as fast as they possibly could to get us out of the storm. Obviously, there are apologies involved, and they wanted to just reassure us that things were fine by telling us a nice little joke about how we were fine for the moment, which I thought was quite handy.
And what about the poor in-flight crew? Because if they were standing and doing service, they must have just been tossed about, were they? How were they?
From what I've seen from the other reports is that the head steward cut his finger fairly badly when it first happened, resulting in medics needing to take care of him. But they're all very professional. They were calm and collected to kind of help the passengers get back to where they were mentally. and just really reassure us that we weren't going to die.
And the scene on the plane was just chaos, was it?
Yeah, so in my section of the cabin, there was a couple behind us which had just gotten these fresh glasses of Pinot, and they had recently arced across the roof, dreadfully, onto the passengers. Drinks along our side was just everywhere because we had just finished our meal, so the mess was minimal. But down the end of the cabin, there was just food everywhere.
Oliver, would this put you off flying? Is it so terrifying that you never want to go back in the air again?
No, I would still definitely fly everywhere. It's just one of those inevitable things you face when flying in giant steel tubes in the air, 9,000 feet high. So I figured it's just, it's just one of the risks you take. It's kind of inevitable.
And what was the rest of the flight like, setting aside the mess?
Very mellow, actually. Everyone seemed to be very light-hearted about it, and it just kind of proceeded as a normal flight, but with extra kind of stepping around people just to make sure they're okay.
Oliver Philp, who was on that plane. Do get in touch. You can comment on our website, rnz.co.nz/checkpoint. You just go to our RNZ website and find it. If you're watching, there's lots of addresses on the screen. If you're listening, Facebook and Twitter, the address is Checkpoint RNZ. You can email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, or if you're kind of old school, and isn't it amazing how fast this has become old school, you can text us on 2101. Here is a slightly longer sting. Coming up, 2 months in jail and still no charges for New Zealander Ko Hapu, who is in Australia. And a bit of a shock shake-up for the Breakers basketball team, plus Nona with business. But first, here's Katrina with the headlines.
The Police and Corrections Minister, Judith Collins, says it was the wrong call to put a man with a history of evading police and known gang associations on electronically monitored bail. Matthew Kidman removed his electronic monitoring bracelet early on Friday morning and has been avoiding the police and his family since. The police say he's potentially dangerous and believe he has access to firearms. Ms Collins told Checkpoint that Corrections did not recommend Kidman receive electronic bail and that it was a decision made by a judge. The minister also told Checkpoint the death of an inmate overnight at Otago Prison was being investigated. It was the second death at the prison in 2 months. Investigators say it's too early to speculate on the cause of a fire that destroyed a White Island tourist boat off the coast of Whakatane yesterday. 60 people had to be rescued from the PJ5 after it was rapidly engulfed in flames. The boat's operator has suspended services until it gets clearance from Maritime New Zealand. The craft was not fully insured. A next-door neighbour says she saw a man in a tracksuit acting suspiciously near the home of a 69-year-old West Auckland woman on the day she was murdered. Sean Shu Tian was found dead by family members at her Te Atatu home early last Friday evening, and the police are searching for whoever is responsible. The court has heard that a Hawke's Bay GP charged with stupefying and indecently assaulting patients is being monitored and should be able to continue seeing patients. The doctor, who has name suppression, is challenging a medical council attempt to suspend him from practice. Officials believe a large fire on Mount Maunganui last week was deliberately caused by fireworks. The Pumicelands Rural Fire Authority say its investigation points strongly to fireworks being thrown from the top of the mountain. It's 27 to 6. I'll be back at 6 with news, sport and more weather.
Thank you very much, Katrina. We thoroughly look forward to it. Nona Peltier is here with business. Nona, we were waiting for some announcement from China, right? It's so lovely to have you back. You were a total star of our first night.
Thanks. Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
So we were waiting for figures on China, from China on growth.
Right.
Because this was meant to set some kind of agenda. It hasn't really, has it?
No, it hasn't. In fact, the market really looked at those numbers and went, It's basically shrugged and carried on just as we were yesterday.
Okay, so what was the growth figure?
Well, the growth figure actually was an increase of 6.9%. That's an expansion of the economy. That's an annual expansion of 6.9%. That's the slowest rate of growth in 25 years.
Isn't that extraordinary? 6.9%, the slowest in a quarter of a century.
It's true.
But it was pretty much as projected, wasn't it?
It was very close, but across the board, it was just, everything was just off a bit. And anyways, no one really trusts those numbers, so it hardly mattered. And in the end, nothing much changed on the markets. However, you know, what's going on with China really does make a big difference of what happens here in New Zealand.
Because if China is spending, New Zealand is doing better.
And are they ever? You know, are they ever? Yeah, they're coming to New Zealand in large numbers. We had a big boom in November. Yeah, it was twice as many visitors from China last November. That's 2015 than we had in November 2013.
And these people are big spenders too, aren't they?
Huge.
This is really interesting because the new Chinese tourism is big money Chinese tourism.
Oh, it is. That's right. And of course, so we had the big news story of the day, let's not forget about that, was about Sky City. Yes, indeed. They updated their guidance for the first half, ended in December. They're expecting their net profit to increase by 30% over the year earlier.
Holy moly.
Yeah, and their international business, which is the high rollers business, these are the guys who come in, and mostly from China. They have to ante up $300,000 to play a hand on
a single hand.
One hand.
Smallest bet, $300,000.
Yeah, and actually that's an increase of where it used to be at $250,000. And I spoke with Nigel Morris, and he said that's a little bit less than what the rest of the, the big money casinos are expecting these big high rollers to ante up.
So what have Sky City got? Where are their casinos? There's one in Auckland, obviously. One sorry, you do. I'm asking you. Sorry, you go. No.
Okay, we've got their big ones are really the Auckland Casino and the Adelaide Casino, which has underperformed for Sky for a while. However, they've cut costs there, so that actually, they've been doing some things. But the other casinos they have are Queenstown, which has been doing quite well with tourism numbers. They have Hamilton and they have Darwin.
Okay, what is the turnover figure?
$7 billion, more than $7 billion.
And then what is it, a half year or a full year?
That's in the first half of the year ended, their financial year ended December 31. But believe it or not, that's actually a small number compared with the size of the market. In Australasia alone, $100 billion in turnover. Yes, indeed. And you know what those high rollers spend when they come to New Zealand?
Oh, just for dread to think.
Think, $15,000 to $20,000 a day. That's an average, but what they think is they're spending.
And that's over and above what they're spending to play, right? Because you said, what, $300,000 for a hand?
Yeah.
More money than sense, as my mother would say.
I'll say. Anyways, look, the market, we might have that. Okay, so of course, Sky City share price, it rose 7%. It ended up 29 cents to $4.45. That helped drive up the New Zealand index to just over 1/3%, up 23 points to 6,124. And the New Zealand dollar didn't change really much at all from the morning. US dollar at 64.4 US cents and 93.7 Australian.
Nana Peltzer, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. See you tomorrow. As Australia uses immigration law like a bit of a blunt weapon with controversy surrounding detention on Christmas Island, on Nauru, on Manus, a New Zealander has now been held in a maximum security prison in Perth for over 2 months. This is Ko Hapu, a former Lance Corporal in the New Zealand Army who served in Afghanistan, where he was seen fit to be in a security detail looking after John Key. But in Perth he joined a bikie gang. He has no criminal convictions and there are no charges against him, but he's been held in prison under immigration laws that have seen his visa revoked on character grounds. His partner is Teresa Mariner. I asked her if, over 2 months after Hapu was simply thrown in prison, he's been charged with anything yet.
No, John, he still has no charges at all.
Okay. In the meantime, he is being kept in Casuarina prison, which is maximum security. Can you describe it for me?
Well, yeah, it is a maximum security prison. There's metal detectors, sniffer dogs, barbed wire fences, lots of checks to get through to see him, not a lot of contact, guards everywhere. It's just not a very nice place to visit.
And he is in a cell reserved for really bad criminal offenders. This is a man with no criminal convictions and no charges against him. How does he spend his day?
Okay, so he's locked in his cell from 5:45 at night till when the guards decide to let them out in the morning. He is with one other inmate in the cell, so it's a room probably about 2 by 2, and they've got a bed in there. They do have a TV now and a fan because there isn't any air conditioning in the prison. It's been extremely hot here, so he's suffered with the heat. But yeah, he spends his day, he gets let out for his meals and to have a shower, and then he's locked back in his cell for the rest of the day.
What is his mental state now, Teresa?
Oh, he's angry. He's really, really angry. He's angry, he's let down, he's upset, he's confused. We can't get any information as to why he's there, how long he's going to be there from anybody, and he's just getting really, really angry.
And the problem is that if he gets too angry, he's going to do something which will actually justify him being in prison, right?
Yeah, that's well, you know, he has his bad days where he's really frustrated, and I sort of try and talk to him, and you know, they're just trying to push and they're trying to get the reaction they want. So it's hard for him to stay calm, obviously, in the surroundings he's in. He's in there with murderers and rapists and all sorts of people, and they can't be the nicest people to be around, especially when you're not a criminal. So he is frustrated.
What is their treatment of you now when you go to visit him, Teresa, as cause partner?
Hasn't over the Christmas period, so the month of December, obviously that's a horrible time of year to not be together to start with. We had a lot of issues within the prison system. Booking is getting cancelled without our knowledge. A Christmas party that children were meant to attend, when we got to the gate, our daughter was told she wasn't allowed to go in. Obviously, she was extremely upset by that. There is one guard in particular who I have a lot of problems with, who makes sexual remarks about my clothing and my body. But I am just getting a complaint in regards to that, because it's not a nice place to visit as it stands, and without the added pressure, you know, it's just not nice.
What's your sense of what's happening here now? Because it's over 2 months and there is just nothing changing, is there? This is your life, this is Cor's life, there are no charges. He's just in a kind of limbo, an awful limbo.
Well, yeah, he's in that prison and he's being treated as a prisoner. You know, as far as we're concerned, he's an immigration detainee, but he has the same rights as a criminal who's been tried and charged for their crimes. He's being treated as a prisoner, and we're just really confused, and we can't understand how any of this can be happening. It's confusion more than anything, and frustration, because no one can tell us anything. Just seems that he's going to be held there for as long as anyone sees fit. And yeah, it just doesn't seem to be ever coming to an end at any point.
Teresa Mariner, Ko Hapu's partner. Now, if you think that sounds like a situation of uncertainty without end, the lawyer acting for Ko Hapu fears that may in fact be right. Barrister Michael Pena-Rees says the Minister, Peter Dutton, has been given immense power.
Well, you're correct, and it is very difficult. What you have is what was previously a situation where there was the judicial authority to review the law. That doesn't occur in these types of matters, migration matters in Australia, because the Minister has total authority. And the only way in which a matter can be taken before the Federal Court is on a judicial review, that is, that the Minister made an error at law, and that's how we're approaching it, and we say that there has been a number of errors made by the Minister.
We keep trying to get the Minister to talk to us. Not a chance. 18 minutes to 6. A neighbour of the 69-year-old woman who was so brutally killed in Auckland says she saw a man fitting the police's description of the potential suspect. Sean Shu Tian was found dead by family members at her Te Atatu home last Friday. Police are still hunting for a attacker. She'd been struck with great force about the face and head several times. Now, today the police have called for sightings of a man in his 20s dressed in a green and white tracksuit and white cap. They say he was on Glenville Lane about lunchtime on Friday. Our police reporter Carla Pemman went and spoke to neighbours and others in the community, and she joins us again. Carla, it's nice to have you back. What did you learn today?
Well, today I went along to the scene, to Glenville Lane, and there was still police tape everywhere, still a heavy police presence. And I went about door knocking with a number of the neighbours, and it was mostly vacant in the area, but I did speak to one neighbour who only lives 2 doors down, and she had this to say.
Like around about 18 years. 18
years. Did you know the woman that was...
No, I didn't know her, but I've seen her around doing her garden and sweeping her concrete.
Oh, wow. Do you know what she was like, or do you know any of the other neighbours that knew her as well?
No, they were quiet. They kept to themselves.
Did you ever see her daughter and son-in-law as well?
Yeah, not often, but I've seen them drive in and drive out.
Do you know how long they've been living at the property?
I would say probably less than 10 years.
Oh, right. Are you concerned for being quite close in proximity to where it happened?
Yeah, I am. I'm a bit concerned because we live to the alleyway, so people come and go. Yeah, a little bit scary.
And police have today said that they're looking for, or appealing for sightings of a man dressed in a green and white tracksuit with a white baseball cap in his 20s on the Friday around lunchtime. Were you around at the time?
Yeah, I was here. I was looking after my granddaughter and my son.
Did you see someone that fitted that description or anything unusual?
Yeah, I did see somebody.
Who did you see?
What the cops described.
So you told the police that you'd seen someone suspecting suspiciously?
Yeah.
Can you tell me anything more about this person?
No, just that he was casual about it. If it was him, I don't know.
And are you guys doing anything differently, given that this person or persons that has done it?
We lock up all the time until we go in and out.
So Carla, a sighting of somebody in the green and white tracksuit. You spoke to other people out there in Te Atatū?
Yes, I spoke to a mother of two who lived just around the corner, and she didn't want to be named or on camera, and she said that she was particularly wanting to hear from the police as to whether it was an intruder who was intending to commit this crime, or if it really was a burglary gone wrong. But regardless of that, she said that she was actively upping the security at her house and keeping her kids inside. And then it also went out to the sort of around the corner. There's the main sort of township just there, and I went and spoke to a few members of the community, and there's definitely a sense of fear for their own safety and their families.
Okay, so
I think the whole community is pretty shaken. I've lived here for 25 years, I suppose. You know, any area things happen, but not a murder. So I think everybody's a little bit fearful. We're a close community, so everybody sort of pulls together, and you know, so yeah, it's just really sad.
Nothing like this has happened. You know, I've been here for over 20 years, and I mean, just goes to show that it can happen anywhere, and I think it's really sad, and especially because it's an elderly person.
Carly, yesterday the police were saying there's a huge list of persons of interest, right? Today they are talking specifically about green and white tracksuit and white hat man. Does that mean the huge list has gone, or is there still lots and lots of broad brushstroking going on here?
Well, the police would not front today, so we don't know at this stage if that is the case. It would appear that this particular person that they've called for sightings of seems to be of the most interest at the moment, but we don't know if it's just that one person at this stage. But as for tonight, there's going to be a candlelit vigil held at the local church, at the Te Atatū Baptist Church, starting in about an hour and a bit.
For people who don't know this community, it really is a slightly old-fashioned part of Auckland, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly seems that way, and the feeling they got from the community is a very close-knit, and they all want to be there for each other, and all saying this kind of thing really doesn't happen in that suburb.
Yeah. Carla Penman, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. Carla, it is 13 minutes to 6. Let's turn to sport now. And tonight, it's not tennis, it's basketball. They've won 4 of the past 5 championships. But today, the New Zealand Breakers announced a pretty major shake-up. Former players Paul Henare and Dylan Boucher will take over as head coach and general manager, replacing Dean Vickerman and Richard Clark. Sports reporter Matt Chatterton was at a somewhat surprising media conference when this was all announced. And I asked him earlier what happened.
Well, we had the owners present, Paul and Liz Blackwell. They were speaking on behalf of the club, and also at the press conference with Paul Henare and Dylan Boucher. Dylan's the new GM and Paul's obviously the new head coach. There was no real sign of Richard Clark, the CEO.
He's outgoing?
Yeah, he's outgoing.
Dean Vickerman?
He also wasn't present during the press conference. They did come out afterwards, but it was very much about, you know, here are our new faces, this is the direction we're taking the club, not much to do with what Richard and Dean have done. They did obviously, Paul Blackwell did talk a lot about the work at the end there, about what work Richard and Dean have done, but it was very much focused on the future.
Are you surprised Dean Vickerman is going now and in these circumstances?
Yes, I am, to be honest. He's only been in the role 3 years. From what everyone at the Breakers was saying is that he'd always planned on only being in control for about 3 or 4 years, that he was trying to create a New Zealand successor as the coach. He wanted someone, obviously, like Paul to take over the club. But the weird thing is, from my point of view, is that Dean isn't going into anything yet. He just said that he's taking a break. He wants to go overseas. It's sort of,
and if this was about legacy creating, if this was about creating an heir apparent and passing over in normal circumstances, surely he would have been sitting beside Paul Henare at the table at the press conference, and surely people would have been told about this in advance, right?
Yes, that's what you would expect. I mean, Paul Henare himself said that Dean told him 3 years ago when Dean came on as head coach after Andre Lamanis left that he was only planning on doing it for 3 years and then hoping for someone to succeed him. That was a New Zealander. And then he also told him that again this year at the start of the season, that was the case. But Paul said himself he didn't believe him. He thought it wasn't going to be that way. He thought he would be under Dean for a few more years to go. But as we found out today, that isn't the case.
Okay. What we also know about the Breakers is that they started the season at a rate of knots. They were off like a robber's dog, but actually they've stalled mid-season, haven't they?
Yeah, so now they are sitting at 11 wins and 10 losses for the season. They're about second or third sort of midway through the first third of the season. Now that we're sort of getting into the back end of the season, they have had a few losses, in particular to Illawarra. So the Breakers are now sitting in fifth. You have to be in the top four to make the playoffs. So they do have quite a bit of work on their hands if they really want to ensure that they can send Dean and Richard out on a good note.
Yeah. Were they pushed or did they jump? Do you have any sense at all, Matt?
I would like to be positive and think that, they jumped, but there was a sense of feeling there that there might have been a bit of pushing involved.
Okay, one final question. Paul Henare, he is loved, he is respected, he is one of the kind of crucial foundations of that club. What will he be like as chief coach?
Well, he's already the head coach of the Tall Blacks, the New Zealand men's basketball team, and he's had some success with them. Obviously, we played the Australian Boomers last year, didn't have too much success against them, and a lot of the Breakers in that team play in the Tall Blacks as well. So I think he's going to be good for the team because they're really sort of combining, he's got the Breakers and the Tall Blacks, and having that consistency I think will be good for the team. And obviously he has so many years' experience and he has a lot of passion for the club, so I think he will be a good fit.
Auckland sports reporter Matt Chatterton. Donald Trump has been the hot topic in a lively debate at the British House of Commons, namely whether he should be banned from entering the UK. A petition calling for the American Republican presidential candidate to be barred from Britain gained more than 500,000 signatures, triggering the unusual debate. The BBC's political correspondent Rob Watson watched it all unfold in London.
Before I give you a flavour of this debate, give you a little bit of something about the setting, because it was held in Westminster Hall, an 11th century building which has played host to some of the great events in British history, including, for goodness sake, the trial of a king. On trial, as it were, this time was Donald Trump, though whether the quality of the debate will go down in history is another matter. Opening it, the Labour MP, Paul Flynn, made a point that was to be repeated many times by those against banning the flamboyant Republican, namely, that would simply give him even more publicity and cast him as a martyr.
The great danger by attacking this one man is that we can fix on him a halo of victimhood. We give him the role of martyrdom, which can seem to be an advantage among those that support him. The line will go out, here's these foreigners interfering, telling us what to do. And I think that would be a grave error if we gave them that situation.
Now, the case for Mr. Trump to be banned was made most passionately by the Labour MP and Muslim Tulip Sadiq. She said the government had banned many other people for offensive comments and that the Republican hopeful had said things that clearly went beyond the acceptable.
I draw the line at freedom of speech when it actually imports violent ideology, which is what I feel is happening. The legislation in place is to protect the public and protect the people of Britain from individuals such as this. If legislation has been practiced before and other people have been stopped from coming into the country, the same rules need to apply to Donald Trump, which is why I feel he shouldn't have been given a visa to come and visit the multicultural country that we are so proud of.
But to be fair, it has to be said the majority of MPs were against banning him on the grounds that either he was A, a buffoon and didn't mean what he was saying, B, that he had stopped short of saying the kind of things that has got some Muslim extremists banned, and C, put forward by the Conservative MP Philip Davis, that there was something nutty about the logic of those who want to keep him out.
For anybody to think that they're so outraged that Donald Trump thinks that people should be banned from his country because of their beliefs can think that the solution to that problem is to ban Donald Trump for his beliefs is absolutely ridiculous. You couldn't make it up.
There you go, a little flavour of the debate, and my favourite quotation, it was that Mr Trump's prejudice and extremism should be greeted by British courtesy and reasonableness. The reason why this debate was happening is kind of unusual. It's because in 2011 the government said that if any petition got more than 100,000 signatures, perhaps Parliament would debate it. So in this case it has. Will it have led to anything? Absolutely not. It is the government, it's the Home Office, the Interior Ministry that decides who should be banned, and even though the British government cannot stick Donald Trump and thinks he's a bit of an idiot, they've got no intention of banning him. So lots of debate, but very little effect.
A wonderful piece from the BBC. Goodness gracious me. Wonderful. 5 minutes to 6 is the time. Who knew the BBC made pieces like that? We should clarify, I don't know how I described Donald Trump in the build-up to that piece, but he is not, of course, the Republican presidential candidate. In his dreams, he wants to be the Republican presidential candidate, and he is fighting very hard to be it. The Republican establishment obviously not that keen on it. Westminster not that keen on it either, but the American people decide. Right. A rare albatross with a wingspan of nearly 3 metres that had to have a badly injured eye removed was set free today off the coast of Wellington following a fortnight of recovering at the zoo. The northern royal albatross, or toroa, is a huge white bird with black upper wings and breeds only in New Zealand. Nick Butcher reports.
Veterinary nurse Sarah Van Herp says the sick albatross was discovered earlier this month at Moore Point, weak, underweight and with a serious eye injury.
Now it's very feisty, eating a lot of salmon, enjoying time on our saltwater pool and ready to go.
The albatross's eye globe was punctured, so it had to be removed to save the bird from further pain and give it a chance to survive. But can a one-eyed albatross live successfully in the wild?
There are reports of one-eyed albatross around, hunting, foraging, breeding, so we hope that this albatross is going to have the same success.
The albatross was ferried out of the harbour aboard the police maritime unit vessel Lady Elizabeth IV. The plan was to take it to a place where other albatross live.
So we're moving at about 20 knots and we will be heading around 5 nautical miles off Wellington coast to an area called the Trench. That's where other albatross tend to live and habitate, hunt for fish, and that's where this albatross will be released, the one-eyed albatross.
Stu Main is a senior launch master on the Lady Elizabeth, and normally he is rescuing boaties in trouble and keeping a watchful eye on commercial and recreational fishing operations. Today, along with zoo staff, he helped set the albatross free from the back of an IRB utility boat on the back of the Lady Elizabeth. He wasn't fazed by the out-of-the-ordinary task.
It's the first time we've done something like this. But one thing in the police is you never know what you're going to get each day you arrive at work. There's always some situation or some incident or some dealings that you have that's different to the day before, so it's a great work environment.
So we're now launching the IRB into the ocean with the 2 zoo staff, the vet and the vet nurse, and the albatross is about to be released. Here we can see the large beak of the albatross just being held by the vet nurse. The albatross is in the water.
Anna Karina Gonzali Argandona is a veterinary surgeon at Wellington Zoo. She's unsure where the albatross might go now that it's free.
Hopefully it should be going back to the area where he came from. It's hard to assess, because he had no banding or anything like that for us to be able to pinpoint exactly what area he comes from. But these guys will spend a lot of time out at sea, so it's like sometimes they can fly for days, so it's not much of a problem. He just finds his bearings and then decide if he wants to go back home.
15 minutes later, the albatross spread its huge wings and began walking on water before taking off into the sky with the classic grace of a Concorde. For Checkpoint, Nick Butcher.
Nick did that as a radio piece, but there were some beautiful pictures over the top. What a remarkable bird as it took off. For those of you who've never done so, the albatross colony in Dunedin is highly recommended for a visit. It really is magic. How those birds leave there and go back to there defies my understanding. We're getting so much lovely feedback and we so appreciate it. We've just got a fantastic email from Craig, who was getting ready for work in Latvia. It's 11 hours behind us in Latvia, so it's just coming up to 7 o'clock in the morning, and Craig is an expat Kiwi who is living and working in Latvia and is listening or watching on live stream. Sorry, I didn't get that, but Craig, we hope you have a wonderful day in Latvia. Thank you to everyone who is contacting us. Feedback, checkpoint at radionz.co.nz is the email address. The website is radionz.co.nz. It's a very good website, and while you're there, I recommend you look up Radio New Zealand International, whose work is outstanding in our region, and on Facebook and Twitter the address is checkpoint at RNZ. Checkpoint at RNZ. We're coming up to the time pips. Here they are. Kia ora everyone, you are indeed with Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. On the radio as always, we're also screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and streaming live on the RNZ website. Coming up, the investigation into the sinking of a tourist boat which caught fire off the Whakatane coast yesterday, and New Zealand's push at the UN to get access to besieged Syrian towns, get supplies, get humanitarian aid in. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Kia ora, good evening. A next-door neighbour says she saw a man in a tracksuit acting suspiciously near the home of a 69-year-old West Auckland woman on the day she was murdered. Sean Shu Tian was found dead by family members at her Te Atatū home early last Friday evening, and the police are searching for the attacker or attackers. They've called for sightings of a man in his 20s dressed in a green and white tracksuit and white cap in the Glenville Lane area about lunchtime on Friday. Neighbour Marianne Pyro says she was at home looking after her granddaughter and her son when a man acting casually raised her suspicions. She says he fitted a police description. The Minister of Corrections says the deaths in prison is unacceptable, but they do happen. An inmate died in Otago Corrections Facility overnight, the second inmate to die at the prison within 2 months. Prison staff found the inmate in an unresponsive state this morning and they died at the scene. The Minister of Corrections, Judith Collins, told Checkpoint with John Campbell it's not known if the death was a suicide, but says there are between 3 and 12 suicides in prisons each year.
It does happen. It's not acceptable. But in the general population, John, I think you've got to also look at the fact that we have, almost 600 people a year out in the population who kill themselves. It's a terrible situation for everybody.
The Minister of Corrections, Judith Collins. And the Police and Corrections Minister says it was the wrong call to put a man with a history of evading police and known gang associations on electronically monitored bail. Matthew Kidman removed his electronic monitoring bracelet early on Friday morning and has been avoiding the police and his family since. The police say he's potentially dangerous and believe he has access to firearms. Judith Collins says Corrections did not recommend Kidman receive electronically monitored bail and that it was a decision made by a judge. The Chinese economy grew by 6.9% last year. The figure was well in line with expectations, but it's the slowest rate of growth for the world's second largest economy in 25 years. The BBC's Steve Evans has the details.
Most countries dream of growth of just under 7% a year, but for China it's a problem. Imports from the rest of the world are falling. A glut of steel from Chinese steelmakers puts pressure on steelmakers everywhere. The cloud on the horizon is how China adjusts. The government in Beijing says what it calls zombie companies, making no profits, will have to close, so Chinese pain will get worse. Debt in China is high. Might that lead to a global crash in property prices? And can a communist authoritarian government get the support of a people when redundancies are rising?
Steve Evans in Beijing. The owner of a tour boat that sank in flames off Whakatane says his company is not fully insured for yesterday's fire. 60 passengers and crew had to jump off the burning PJ5 into the ocean after a trip to White Island. Maritime New Zealand and the Transport Accident Investigation Commission are investigating. White Island Tours Managing Director Peter Tate told Checkpoint the boat is insured, but their loss of earnings is not. The death toll from starvation in the Syrian town of Madaya continues to rise even after 2 emergency food aid deliveries last week. Another 5 people have starved to death and aid workers fear there'll be many more. They say food isn't enough. The ABC's Sophie McNeil reports.
The medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières has called for the immediate evacuation of 18 critically ill patients, but so far the Syrian government has not agreed to let them leave Madaya. The MSF official told the ABC that many of those at risk of imminent death were so malnourished the sudden presence of food hadn't been enough to save them, and in some cases eating too quickly made patients worse.
Sophie McNeil reporting. A person has died in a water incident in the Coromandel. St John Ambulance says it tried to save the person, but they died at the scene at Kereta just before 4:30. A spokesperson referred queries to the police. The police say they don't have any details yet. To sport, the soon-to-be Breakers coach Paul Henare says he didn't believe Dean Vickerman when he said he planned to leave at the end of this season. Vickerman has decided to stand down after first joining the NBL Basketball Club as an assistant coach in 2007. He's been in charge for the last 3 years, and Henare says the Australian had always indicated that he'd only be in the job for that long.
He said this at the start of his tenure 3 years ago, that he was going to be walking away. I didn't believe him at the time. And he then told me near the start of this season that he was still sticking by that decision. And again, I still didn't think he was going to do it, but he stayed true to his word.
Another former player, Dylan Boucher, will replace Richard Clark as the Breakers general manager. The 4-time champions are currently 5th on the Australian NBL table. The New Zealand cyclist Greg Henderson has finished 10th on the first stage of the Tour Down Under in South Australia. Henderson was part of the sprint finish that was won by Australian Caleb Ewan. The Chiefs have suffered a double injury blow with All Blacks hooker Nepo Lalala and lock Dominic Bird, both suffering long-term injuries at training. The pair were recruited from the Crusaders. Lalala is out for the year with a knee injury and Bird is out for 10 weeks with a foot fracture. And the American Venus Williams has been beaten in the first round of the Australian Open in Melbourne by British #1 Johanna Konta. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the odyssey of Rick Morse, who in 1969 reached one end of the hippie trail that ran from Europe through Asia to Australia. Rick was at the Australian end, Darwin, where the hippies mixed with the locals. While economist Brian Easton assesses the state of the global economy in 2016, China's got the sneezes. Does that mean we're in for a bout of influenza? For that and other metaphors for modern life, join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Peninsula, the Bay of Plenty. A few showers clearing in the morning, however cloudy periods persisting in Northland with the odd shower tomorrow evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Fine spells and occasional showers, the showers becoming confined to the high country tomorrow. Gisborne, rain mostly clearing this evening but persisting about East Cape. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, showers with possible thunderstorms north of Christchurch, easing this evening, becoming fine in the morning. Bulla and Westland, showers becoming confined to the ranges tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, scattered rain, clearing overnight. However, rain returning to Fiordland tomorrow afternoon and scattered fall spreading to Southland and Clutha at night. The Chatham Islands, low cloud or fog, rain developing tonight, clearing tomorrow afternoon or evening. It's almost 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Katrina Batten. We should say that the program, if you're just tuning in for the first time, and it's only the second time we've been on air, so you can be entirely forgiven for that, is a 90-minute checkpoint now, and at 6:30 there is a new evening edition of World Watch with John Greaves. Half an hour of news from around the world. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says it's too early to speculate on the cause of a fire that destroyed a tourist boat off the coast of Whakatane yesterday afternoon. 60 people had to jump into the ocean from the PJ5 after it was quickly engulfed by flames. Debris from the boat has washed up along 400 metres of the Bay of Plenty coast there. The owner of the boat, White Island Tours Managing Director Peter Tate, told us a short time ago, in fact about an hour ago, 40 minutes ago, the company is not fully insured for yesterday's fire.
The boat's insured, and business will carry on. We have the other two boats that will pick up the workload, albeit they'll have to work a bit harder until we can get our head around what we are going to do as far as replacing it in any shape or form. But we just hope that the insurance side of it goes all right. But it's a horrendous price to pay to try and get cover for loss of earnings when you're dealing with the marine industry or anything like that.
Peter Tate, one of the owners of the boat that burst into flame. RNZ reporter Andrew McRae was at a media conference by the Transport Accident Investigation Commission this afternoon. He joins us now from near the mouth of the Whakatane River. Gosh, it looks like a beautiful evening there, Andrew, for people who are watching. What do the Transport Accident Investigation people have to say?
Well, John, they say that it could take up to 18 months to conclude their investigation. There have been a number of phases. They will look at the paperwork behind the operation. They plan to interview a number of the passengers and, of course, the crew, and then get into real in-depth investigations. Now, they say they may either salvage the wreck, bring it up from the sea, or possibly send divers down. They have yet to decide what they'll do on that. They can't yet decide or won't confirm that the fire was caused by in the engine room itself. They know there was a fire, there's no dispute over that, but they won't confirm yet that it was definitely a fire in the engine room, though possibly it's looking like it would be from there, but they're yet to confirm that. They're also looking at the survivability of the incident. And as we know that everyone did survive, 60 people were lucky to be saved out there in the sea last evening. They also look at the availability of life rafts and also life jackets. There's been some talk that some of the passengers didn't receive a life jacket in the mayhem that was going on because the fire was so swift and ferocious that some of the life jackets were unable to be obtained by the passengers. So some had to jump onto lifeboats and be picked up by other boats, and some then who did have life jackets threw them back to others that were on board. So the sort of things that the the Transport Commission will look at over the next 6 to 18 months.
Thanks, Andrew. What about the debris in the area? Obviously, this is a fairly large craft, so there would have been oil, petrol, whatever on board, and debris along the coastline. Are there environmental concerns?
They say no, not at this stage. There's been no oil found along the coastline here, because they say because of the ferociousness of the fire, a lot of that fuel would have been burnt up out to sea. But just across the mouth of the Whakatane River, where I'm at the moment, just up the beach about probably 500 to a kilometre, there are a number of sort of pieces of wood that have washed ashore from the vessel. We were shown them this afternoon by the Regional Council, and for the casual observer, you wouldn't even notice it, thinking it was anything more than the normal debris that washes up on a beach. But when you look closely, some had nails in it, and you could see that it was charred and charcoal sort of wood. So it's about 6 of them along the beach, and these will be picked up and be part of the investigation carried out by TAC.
Andrew McRae, live from the river mouth there. Thanks so much, Andrew. We really appreciate it. 12 minutes past 6 is the time on Checkpoint. The besieged Syrian town of Madaya, a former holiday resort, believe it or not, where people are now starving to death because, according to its critics, the Syrian government simply doesn't care enough to save them. Difficult negotiations are taking place with New Zealand and Spain on the UN Security Council, pushing for increased humanitarian access to Syrian towns destroyed by conflict and by the difficulties and perils of intervention in a conflict beyond pity. Even just to get food in is impossible in some situations. After lobbying and protracted negotiations, a third UN convoy carrying food has just been allowed into Madaya, 2 in the past week, 1 in October. Seriously, 3 since October. It's something, but not enough. Hundreds of people are critically ill, and helping them requires much more intervention. In total, it's estimated there are 450,000 people trapped in around 15 sieged towns or communities in Syria. New Zealand's ambassador to the United Nations, Gerard van Bohomen, told me just getting to them involves intense negotiations. But with whom?
These towns are being besieged by different parties. The Syrian government is besieging some, and Madaya is one of those. And some of the opposition armed groups are also besieging towns. In addition to that, there's the situation that ISIL has besieged a number of towns, and there was a terrible report over the weekend about a massacre of 300 people in one of the towns over there in the eastern part of the country that ISIL is besieging. So now, sadly, it's been very difficult to get hard information out about these towns. And the reason all of this came to the surface a week or so ago was that they were able to get some independent information to make it clear it was that bad, and that basically embarrassed the Syrian government into giving access at long last.
Can you tell me what it's like in Madaya? How bad is it there?
All I can tell you is what the UN has told us, which is that it is very bad. There are people who have starved and are starving, and we also know that there are people with acute medical conditions. And that's the other part of our request, is to allow medical access into the town, either evacuations out of town, which would be the best thing. So far that seems to not be possible, but at least to allow medical access into the town from Damascus.
So you've been able to get food in, but there are critically ill and starving people who desperately need treatment, and so far you've been unable to either get them out or medical attention into them.
That's as I understand it. What we had been told the first day that the UN got in, there were about several hundred people that needed urgent attention. We know at least one case got out, and we know that some some mobile hospitals assistance has got in, but we understand there are still people that should be evacuated, and the Syrian authorities are still not approving that evacuation.
What do you say to the Syrian authorities in that context? How do you have a conversation with them that appeals to their decency and their empathy when there is so little decency and empathy left in this conflict in Syria?
That's very difficult. I talked to the Syrian ambassador here. He will deny often the facts as we understand them to be. As little ago as a week, he was asserting this was all being made up, and the UN information gave the lie to that. And it has been two problems. People can't agree on what the facts are, and also there's been a callous disregard for the fate of their own people as they go in this ridiculous power struggle that's going on. The fate of the Syrian people, who they're really fighting about, because it's the control of the country they're talking about, is just not taken into account at all. So today in the Security Council, we were briefed by the UN Special Envoy, Staffan de Mistura, who told us about all the trouble he's having getting the political talks underway. And even he said one of the essentials to make this work is for some demonstration to the Syrian people that their situation will get better. And that's, he said, the access to the besieged towns is critical, even in that context.
That's New Zealand's ambassador to the UN, Gerard van Bohomen, speaking from New York a couple of hours ago. A chemical the World Health Organization considers probably carcinogenic will continue to be used in New Zealand despite calls for a ban. Tens of thousands of litres of weed killer containing the active ingredient glyphosate are used in Auckland each year alone. That's tens of thousands of litres just in Auckland. Obviously it's used everywhere in New Zealand. Kate Newton reports.
Onipoto Domain in the Auckland suburb of Northcote on a blustery, sunny school holiday Tuesday. There's no herbicides in this park after the local board made a decision to use edge trimmers and other alternative methods of keeping the weeds at bay. And most parents RNZ spoke to today would like to see that happen in other parks in the city too.
No, I don't like the idea of Roundup in our parks. I suppose with the kids they're always sort of scrounging in there and stuff. Is it that big of a thing should we look at safety first over having a few weeds?
I guess if they don't use it in this park, they don't have to use it in other parks, do they?
We use at home vinegar and dishwashing liquid, and that works perfectly well. So if they can look at a natural alternative, that should definitely be looked at as well.
Last March, a World Health Organization agency announced glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup and many other weed killers, is probably carcinogenic. though it couldn't say at what level. A committee which does assess that risk is now reviewing that position. In the meantime, New Zealand's Environmental Protection Agency has continued to deem the chemical okay to use as a weed killer. The Green Party's Stephen Browning wants that to change.
We're asking for glyphosate-based herbicides and similar herbicides to be removed from streets and parks throughout New Zealand.
And Mr Browning says councils shouldn't be waiting for the agency to change its mind.
While we are calling for the EPA to do an urgent reassessment, and reassessment like now, we still want councils to be listening to their communities and then to take that into account and be precautionary and responsible to their citizens.
Mr Browning says figures given to him show the Auckland Council used about 77,000 litres of Roundup last year, along with other non-chemical methods such as hot water and manual weeding. The council's Chief Operating Officer, Dean Kimpton, says the cost of not using glyphosate would be prohibitive.
Hot water or steam is 2 to 3 times more expensive than glyphosate in a similar application. If you go to the mechanical or the manual forms of weed control, those costs vary significantly and can be far greater as well.
Mr Kimpton says the council's comfortable with the advice it gets from the Environmental Protection Agency, but it would review that if the EPA changed its stance. Some communities in Auckland aren't waiting though. A member of the North Shore-based Kaipātiki local board, Danielle Grant, says the board's decided to use $54,000 or 5% of its total funding to keep as many of its parks and playgrounds as possible spray-free.
But it's certainly something that's not necessarily absolutely sustainable for us to maintain that. It is going to be us advocating to the governing body of council to really see if there's a change that can be made and for us to be supported.
The Environmental Protection Agency declined RNZ's interview requests. In a written statement, it says it has no immediate plans to reassess glyphosate, but is actively monitoring the chemical status and any developments. For Checkpoint, Kate Newton.
Got some feedback. We're receiving so much feedback. Thank you to everyone who was listening and sending in encouragement, suggestions, advice, critiques. It's wonderful to hear from you. Lots and lots of comments on electronic bracelets. Let's look at this one from Lance by email. Bracelets are monitored by third-party security firms and are no obligation to follow up removal, but only to report this to police. Yes, I think a district court judge in Christchurch, Lance, said basically electronic bracelets work if the people wearing them are prepared to let them work, and if they are not prepared to let them work, then they're disastrous. So it really is a case-by-case basis. Hayley Anderson, electronic monitoring, if they're dangerous, add a taser feature at least. It's really pathetic in the current form. Mark Alexander, Judith Collins was being naive or disingenuous regarding electronic monitoring bail. Who recommends this to a judge? The probation service, which is part of corrections. She is, of course, both police and corrections minister. Do get in touch. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The Auckland property market gets lots of media attention, far too much, say some of you, but in Queenstown an increase in the resident population is driving up prices there too. With a large population of surfers workers earning relatively low wages, the cost of accommodation in Queenstown is increasingly prohibitive, and we are going to look at the cheaper end, although by golly that's a relative term too, in a couple of minutes. But first, Queenstown is seeing dramatic growth at the upper end of the market, where properties are being sold as holiday homes for the wealthy from far and wide. Our Queenstown reporter Peter Newport went to look at a striking property in Queenstown currently being marketed by Sotheby's.
This property is set on 10 acres of land just 15 minutes from central Queenstown in Dalefield. It's 670 square metres and was designed by Michael Fowler. It features 5 large bedrooms, a designer kitchen and entertaining areas that open to courtyards and an outdoor swimming pool. The award-winning gardens that are the work of landscape architect Ralph Kruger follow the European theme and incorporate woodland, ponds and manicured hedging. Within the grounds is a 106 square metre barn that could be used as a self-contained cottage.
I'm with agent Vanessa Sharp, and Vanessa's agreed to talk to us about the house and also about the Queenstown market. So Vanessa, I mean, frankly, I can't believe this house. I didn't even know we had houses in New Zealand that are this beautiful.
Absolutely, it's quite a credit to the owners.
had a vision, 2000 it was built. And they employed Sir Michael Fowler, the architect from Wellington, and Ralph Kruger, who did the landscape architect, and have mirrored an incredible house with incredible grounds.
Now, people listening on the radio will just be hearing us talk, but if somebody's watching online, they can see amazing video of this house. The thing that surprises me most, though, is there are other houses, even along this road, that are in the same amazing interstellar class of accommodation. I mean, where did these houses come from?
Well, it's a mixture of probably Auckland holiday homes and holiday homes from people from all around the world. This is a destination that people want to be. It's incredible summer, winter, ski season. I mean, there's days people go skiing up the hill and water skiing in the lake. It's just one of those destinations, and we're only going to see more of it. We're seeing more and more overseas people that are actually flying into Queenstown and buying property that week because this is somewhere that they have to be. So it's a very internationally recognised resort now.
Is there a danger, though, that these amazing houses and the prices that go with them could eventually make Queenstown something of an elitist place where New Zealanders can't afford to live?
Well, it's an international destination, I suppose, like Aspen, St Moritz. Yes, there is that possibility. The prices will be driven up because there's no more land being made. It's just one of those things.
Now, how do you sell a place like this? I mean, what are your techniques? What are the tricks you use to find a good buyer?
There's no tricks, unfortunately. I wish there were. It's a matchmaking process. It really is just marketing the property as best you can with images, reaching the right marketing areas where you think the buyer's going to come from, and letting them come and fall in love with it. And then my job's easy. It's just matching buyer and seller and getting the deal to happen.
And is Queenstown now more expensive than Auckland?
It's on a par, I think. I believe the average prices are around about the same. I think it depends on the areas of the market. I believe the Auckland market, apartments are still busier than ever. But certainly Queenstown is experiencing a boom, and I think that will probably happen for the next couple of years.
And a guide price for this property?
This property guide price is 9 to 10 million.
And is that good value, or is it even a bargain to some people from overseas?
Well, I suppose it's a labour of love that's taken the current owners 15, 16 years, maybe more, to achieve. If someone wants to spend that time achieving...
Well, it just disappeared without trace. $10 million. If you don't have that, Queenstown's first low housing area, so purpose-built, was today given interim approval. 134 homes next to the Kawero River have been tentatively approved by commissioners appointed by the Queenstown Lakes District Council, because housing is very, very expensive there. They're just a few kilometres down the road from the house Peter visited, that $10 million place or somewhere in that facility. But they will go on the market from about $450,000 up. That's what constitutes cheap housing in Queenstown, though. Now, Conan Young reports.
Queenstown's housing shortage hit the headlines last year when it was revealed one home was being rented by 30 people. The local ward councillor, Kath Gilmore, has welcomed today's announcement and says the district will die if it can't accommodate the 700 workers who flock there each year.
We need affordable housing not just for workers who are transient, but also for our families. We have always lost people who cannot afford to live here because they're working two jobs and not getting enough money.
The Bridesdale Farm subdivision, which can't be contested in the Environment Court, is made possible by legislation seeking to increase housing supply in parts of the country with affordability problems. Kath Gilmore says while she's in favour of preserving the region's natural beauty, something needed to be done to address the housing shortage.
We don't want to end up with swathes of housing all over the basin. That's not the answer either. Then we lose what everyone has come here to live for. Any solution will manage to peeve some people off, and if you peeve all parties off equally, then you've probably got as good a balance as you can get.
The subdivision includes 3- and 4-bedroom townhouses on sections as small as 160 square metres. The property investor and consultant, Ollie Newland, says at less than $500,000 each, the homes will most likely be snapped up by investors looking to rent them out at a tidy profit.
I think it's highly likely, especially if the loan-to-value ratio lending by the banks is not quite as harsh as it is in Auckland. I think there will be a queue down there. It's a popular area and it's on a roll.
But he says the development is not without its risks.
because of the small sites and obviously the places are sitting cheek by jowl, is that you may create a slum, especially if a lot of tenants go in there. Some tenants aren't as good as others. Preferably have much more in the way of homeowners.
The economist Shamabil Yaqub notes special housing areas are only available for a limited time in Queenstown and that no more will be considered after March this year.
What we need is a much more fundamental and long-term fix. And for that, we need to resolve the issues around the planning rules and around the funding for local government, particularly around infrastructure that goes into development of new houses.
A further 3 sites are being considered by the council as possible special housing areas. Decisions on these are expected in the next 2 months. For Checkpoint, Conan Young.
Thanks, Conan. Conan is one of our excellent Christchurch-based reporters, but Radio New Zealand has reporters all around the country. Peter, we heard from before, is based in Queenstown, reporters in Christchurch, Invercargill, Dunedin, the Hawke's Bay, Manawatu, Waikato, Auckland, Wellington, Parliament, of course. I'm just raving because it was about a minute ago, but I do want to say the feedback we're receiving is absolutely wonderful. We're pretty immersed in the program once we get on air, and it's quite hard for me to go through it all, but I'm just having a look at some of it now. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you listening, and we really appreciate the level of your engagement. James Milne, aka Lawrence Arabia, was on the show last night talking about his theme. It's coming up underneath me now. That's Checkpoint for this evening. Thanks for joining us on your radio, your telly, online, however you chose to connect with us today. Thanks for joining in so actively too. We're going to have a bigger sample of feedback tomorrow. We're swamped by how much there is. You can hear highlights of the show on Late Edition at 10:15 this evening. Any of our stories you can find on the Radio New Zealand, we've changed the channel, on the Radio New Zealand website, and it's really worth visiting that website. It's very good. But now it's time for World Watch with John Greaves. All you need to know from around the world. See you tomorrow, I hope.